Now?
Yes, we see the presentation. Perfect.
So I'm not going to focus on monitoring exclusively, not even mainly, perhaps, but rather in the light of what we have heard from Claire and Mirko about where the science is currently on these issues. I thought it might be useful to provide a bit of an overview what the EU and the Commission more specifically is doing to further improve the state of knowledge and make that knowledge useful for the purpose of moving towards healthier soils. And I would like to start with a bit of an overview of the landscape, if you want, of R&I, if the slides would be moving. Yes, so that's the overview with which I would like to start. And this will be probably quite familiar to many, but maybe not all of you who are following this webinar. So we have, of course, had for a long time in the EU those so-called framework programs for research and innovation. We are currently at the 9th framework program, which is called Horizon Europe. But I've mentioned here also the previous one, Horizon 20, if only because this is the program from which EJP Soil is receiving the EU share of its funding, which Claire mentioned earlier. And also in there already you had quite a number of relevant projects that are partially still ongoing or have only recently finished their work. There's quite a long timeline, of course, from the drafting of a call for proposals to the selection of projects until then finally the projects deliver their results. So this is something to keep in mind. In Horizon Europe, I have mentioned here 3 things in particular. This is organized by clusters. Again, this will be familiar to so many of you. We have a cluster number 6, which is on food, agriculture, and environment, among other things. So this is the place to look for a lot of the work that's relevant for our current purposes. We also have something that is new in Horizon Europe. We have so-called R&I missions, including one mission on soil health in particular, and I'm going to elaborate on that throughout the rest of the presentation. But I wanted to also at least mention briefly a partnership, again, between the Commission and member states. One of several partnerships, this one on agroecology in particular. It's not yet up and running. It's quite advanced in terms of its preparation. And it's supposed to be launched, if I'm not mistaken, still this year. Then, of course, in DG Agriculture, the vast majority of what colleagues in this DG work on is, of course, the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, which is not, of course, as such a research policy, but it does have relevant elements, not least the so-called CAP network, which might still be better known in this previous name, the EIP Agri, European Innovation Partnership, which does a lot, I would say, to bring the latest research findings to actors on the ground, farmers and other land managers, but also people in other parts of the food system. Because, of course, we want our policies to be guided by the best available science and knowledge, but we cannot just rely on everything being written into the legislation. We also need the targets, if you want, of those regulatory measures to be up to speed and even proactive, ideally, when it comes to improving soil health. I've also briefly mentioned here the LIFE program, which is programmed by our colleagues in DG Environment and DG Klima. I think we will hear from one relevant LIFE projects later in this webinar. So then, as I said, focusing on the soil mission, which is one of the things that we do here in the R&I unit in DG Agriculture, providing the secretariat together with colleagues in DG Research. Just to locate it briefly in the overall context, there are 5 missions now in Horizon Europe, 4 of which are directly relevant to the European Green Deal. And you can see that soil health is right up there with the main societal challenges, such as climate change and oceans and waters, as one of the things that we want to tackle with this new instrument in the toolbox of EU R&I. You have somewhat technical definition here of how we understand those missions. Of course, it's not something that the Commission has invented. This idea of mission-oriented R&I has been around for a while, but it's really the first time that it's being applied at such a large scale. And it's still early days, but it's also, we're beginning to see at least some of the work being actually implemented, and it's quite exciting to see how this will develop. So then, in a relatively dense image here, the intervention logic, if you want, of the soil mission, with its headline goal of establishing 100 living labs and lighthouses to lead the transition to healthy soils by 2030. This is the headline towards which we operate, but of course it doesn't give us much, it doesn't tell a lot about what we actually aim to achieve in terms of soil health. And for this we have developed more specific objectives, 8 in total. And if you look at them, at least the first 6, sorry, correspond quite closely to the aspects of soil degradation about which Mirko has spoken. We also have, with objectives 7 and 8, 2 that are a little bit more horizontal, let's say, in terms of addressing the international dimension on the one hand, and also increasing soil literacy. For which the mission as a vehicle seems quite useful, in the sense that it aims to bring in a much broader range of actors than we usually have in, let's say, traditional R&I policy, really reaching out to people from all walks of life and in all kinds of places. In addition to these specific objectives, we have so-called operational objectives, and here you will probably be mostly interested in the third one, which is all about monitoring, and on which we work especially closely with the JRC, the Joint Research Center, and Luca will focus on this in the next presentation. The second operation objective here is then again specifically about the place-based work that we aim to do in, or through rather, living labs and lighthouses. And I thought I had a slide on that as well, but it seems to have disappeared. Apologies for that. If there are questions on the living labs, happy to take them then through the written exchange. This is how the, let's say, the nuts and bolts of the R&I program, the first operational objective, is being operationalized through annual work programs. We have had 3 of them until now, with progressively increasing amounts of funding. And the third call for the work program 23, which is currently open. This is the first one which actually includes a call for the establishment of living labs. We can see this in a little bit. You see, this is where the slide has moved. I just mixed up the order. Anyway, I'm going to skip that now, and probably you will get it for reference later on, and instead zoom in on the current work program, which, as I said, is open until September for applications. And I'm not going to run through all the topics here, just to give you an idea of the breadth of issues that are being tackled, and also the variety of actions that we use for that purpose. REI is a research and innovation action, which is kind of the, let's say, the middle of the road approach, where you have some basic research, but also trying to push towards more applied outcomes. We also have innovation actions, which are focusing more on the on maximizing the uptake of knowledge that is already there. And for example, we have one here on desertification, where a lot of research has been done, and where we really want to have projects now that take the available scientific knowledge and test it, scale it up on the ground. We also have one so-called coordination and support action here, CSA, which is related to the work on soil literacy. And as I mentioned, we have 2 separate topics here on living labs. One, which is really open to ideas being developed bottom up on whatever challenges for soil health the applicants consider most relevant. And another one, which is reserved for work on carbon farming. So I think I can leave it here for the time being. And on the last slide, I have just listed a few links. Let me just mention specifically the last one here, the research conference that we have planned for 31st of May and 1st of June. This is a major event in the longer cycle of strategic planning of agricultural research. It's open for registration, and you will see that the program is not finalized yet in all its details, but you can already see that there will be a lot of interesting things happening there. Thank you very much, and back to you, Anna.